It's hard to believe that it's already been over 9 years since the release of one of my favorite games of all time, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. But how does this masterpiece of a game stack up against the legendary Elder Scrolls V Skyrim when it comes to attention to detail? So in this video, guys, we're going to be doing a direct comparison to one of my favorite games of all time, The Witcher 3 versus the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Two very different games, one of them being more of a narrative-driven RPG, while the other one is more of a sandbox RPG, but nonetheless, when it comes to attention to detail, these games should be a lot of fun to compare. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed making it for you guys. And if you're new to my channel, welcome to Live from My Basement, where I make cool new videos like the one you're watching right now every single week. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future content. But guys, let's dive into the video. Beginning with your character, in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, you are your player-made character, choosing not only your race, but how you act within the world. With Skyrim being more of a sandbox RPG, you can do whatever you want in the sandbox, including taking out entire villages and towns. While in The Witcher 3, a narrative RPG, you play as Geralt, a Witcher monster hunter for hire. And by playing a specific role in the narrative, you can't just go around wiping out entire towns and villages, as that's not something that your character, Geralt, would do. Which goes to show, though they are both fantasy RPGs, one plays more like a fantasy sandbox while the other plays like a fantasy novel. Moving on to the settings, in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim you play in Tamriel in the province of Skyrim, with its many Norse Viking-esque themes seen in its many towns and villages. While The Witcher 3 is set in the northern realms of the continent with its more European medieval themes. Though if you visit the Skellig Isles, it can look very similar to the province of Skyrim. But when it comes to the size of these two games' worlds, Skyrim has about 15 real-world square miles, while The Witcher 3 has closer to 50 square miles. Moving on now to how the games handle cities, in Skyrim the cities are actually a lot smaller than you might think. Bethesda achieves this by cleverly laying the geometry to make you feel claustrophobic, making you feel like the city is larger than it really is. For example, Solitude, the capital of Skyrim, only has 8 houses within its walls. While in The Witcher 3, besides having much more populated cities, the cities themselves are much larger, with many different districts and boroughs, as a city of this size in this age would really have. And speaking of cities, how you enter them is completely different between the two games. In Skyrim, once you interact with the gate, you have to load into the city. While in The Witcher 3, entering a city is as seamless as walking or riding through the city gates. This also applies when entering any shops or buildings, as in Skyrim, whenever you enter a building, you have to load into that building in order to do business, while in The Witcher 3, entering a building is as simple as opening the door and beginning your conversation. The only loading occurs whenever you're fast traveling between major regions. Moving on now to a comparison of the combat, in Skyrim you can play the game from either first or third person, so whether you're fighting in a melee or casting spells, it needs to work from both perspectives. While The Witcher 3 is played exclusively in third person, meaning the third person combat is a bit more fleshed out, with more of an emphasis on dodging on top of the melee and magic. And speaking of combat, I find it interesting that both games have highly stylistic slow motion kill effects that serve as crescendos to the ends of your combat encounters. It's one of those things that no matter how often I see it from either game, it never gets old. Moving on now to a neat comparison of how each game handles inclement weather. As you can see here in Skyrim, the wind and rain does not affect the world around you, whereas in The Witcher 3, the wind from the storm is bending the trees. You can see that, you can hear the twisting and cracking of the branches, and it looks and sounds great. On top of that, in The Witcher 3, you can also see the rain running down the cobblestone walls of the towns and villages, whereas in Skyrim, there's no such effect. Moving on now to a comparison of the water physics between the two games. As you can see here in Skyrim, interacting with the water still looks great, and it looks great also in The Witcher 3. Though I gotta say, I always kind of felt that The Witcher 3's water looked like you were jumping into like a painting or something like that. I also found it interesting in The Witcher 3 that whenever you say shoot a crossbow into the water, there's no splash effect in the water at all, whereas in Skyrim, there is a splash effect, and you can also see the arrow float down the river, which is cool. But I gotta say, whenever you use the Ard sign to push the water in The Witcher 3, it looks really impressive with some cool ripple water effects. But I did notice that in Skyrim, whenever you use Unrelenting Force, you can actually see it pass through the surface of the water as well, which was a nice surprise. Moving on now to a comparison of how fire and lighting works between the two games. In Skyrim, as you can see, a lot of the fires in the world don't really put off that much light into the world, whereas in The Witcher 3 they burn a lot brighter, illuminating the darkness and casting pretty detailed shadows. This is a bit easier to see in Skyrim whenever you cast fire spells yourself. As you can see, it barely illuminates the darkness, which is a far contrast from what you see in The Witcher 3. Moving on now to a comparison of the snow physics, because you know if both games have snow, I have to do a comparison of it. In Skyrim, as you can see, whenever you walk through the snow, your character does not leave any footprints or interact with the snow at all, whereas in The Witcher 3, whenever you walk through snowy environments, you can see that Geralt is leaving tracks in the snow behind him. And I know this might seem small, but I love snow in video games, so I had to show it. Moving on now to a comparison of how you actually interact and navigate the world around you. In Skyrim, as you know, you have your trusty compass, which shows you areas of interest that are near your location, and you can go to them and discover them. It's great. You can also pick up and interact with things in the world of Skyrim, which makes your character feel grounded in that world. Whereas in The Witcher 3, they handle things a little bit differently, as the way I feel grounded in that game is instead by using the Witcher senses, focusing and listening into the environment to pick up traces of enemies, whether it's monsters or animals in the world. It makes me feel immersed and grounded within that world without having to use a traditional compass. Now with this next comparison, it simply stems from the fact that I wasn't sure if each game handled differently, falling from a high altitude and landing in water, and as you can see in Skyrim, you will survive and your character will go beneath the surface of the water, whereas in The Witcher 3, you will also survive, but your character doesn't dip beneath the surface, which looks kind of funny. But I also noticed that, as you can see here in The Witcher 3, if you land on something that isn't water, your character will ragdoll and die, but it fades to black too quickly, whereas in Skyrim, it doesn't fade to black until much later, so you can see all the ridiculous ragdoll physics that the game has to offer. Moving on now to my final comparison, which is actually how each game handles waiting. As you can see here in Skyrim, whenever you wait, you can actually see the environment change hour by hour, which is a pretty nice feature, whereas in The Witcher 3, it's called meditating, and it's also when Geralt replenishes his potions, but I gotta say that in The Witcher 3, meditating goes by a lot faster than the waiting that we see in Skyrim.
Witch hunters defend us from monsters.
Well guys, you made it to the end of the video. This has been my direct comparison of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt versus The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. And as I said at the beginning of the video, The Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games of all time, and I cannot believe it's already 9 years old. That blows my mind. But as I always say with these direct comparison videos, I'm not trying to say, as I just said, The Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games ever made, but I'm not trying to say that Skyrim is a bad game or anything like that. If anything, I showed in this video that there's certain elements when it comes to attention to detail that even Skyrim does better than The Witcher 3. I personally enjoy both of these games, and I hope you guys do as well. Not trying to say that either of these games are bad or worse than each other. I personally just enjoy making these kinds of comparison videos, and I hope you guys enjoy watching them as well. But guys, that's all I have for this video. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think of this comparison? Is there anything I left out that I should have had in the video? Let me know down in the comments. I can't wait to read those. But guys, that's all I have for this video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.